Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
On today's Your Take, I'm joined by a popular radio presenter who's been on the airwaves for many years. My guest's dulcet tones have been heard on commercial radio stations such as Sam FM, Atmosphere Radio, 96.3 Radio Aire, and Red Dragon. My guest has presented breakfast and drive time slots and was a successful duo with Sally Bailey, where they presented on the Galaxy 101 breakfast show for 5 years, and then the music theme show Core Control in the early 2000s. I'm joined today by radio presenter Kam Kelly. We discuss Kam's early life, his love of radio, and his career breakthrough, his experiences behind the microphone, and the demise of Sam FM. The mics are on, we're live on air, time for some talk radio, and a warm Your Take welcome to a fellow Bristolian, welcoming Kam Kelly to Your Take. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you. It's interesting because we've spoken to two radio broadcasters.
Mm-hmm.
One was John Darville, who's BBC Radio Bristol, and the other one, the children's television veteran and talk radio host, Tommy Boyd.
Okay.
Now we kind of come from a different angle with the commercial side of broadcast radio. So I'm interested to talk about how you got into your career as a radio presenter. But firstly, before we talk about radio and how your breakthrough happened, I wanted to kind of go back to the very beginning, basically to your early life.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of wanted to begin by asking you when and where you were born, and can you just give us some background on your childhood and just tell us a bit about your parents and what they did for a living?
Yeah, sure. So you sort of introduced me as a fellow Bristolian, which I'm actually honoured by, maybe a plastic Bristolian or indeed an adopted one, because Bristol is the place that I probably love more than anywhere in the world. And I've spent so much of my career trying to get back to since I first came here back in '97. But earlier than that, and do we really need to divulge the when, but the where, I was certainly, I was born in North London to an Australian mum and a Polish dad. Mum taught deaf children and my dad was a photographer, although if he ever watches this, he'll protest that he still is a photographer, which is absolutely fine. And yeah, so I grew up in North London, randomly grew up in the Arsenal part of London, but just through and through Spurs fan all the way, really. And I think because I was my mum's first, she experimented with schooling, being in the education system herself. So I think I went to about 5 different primary schools before one secondary school. Academically, I wasn't particularly good. I failed my GCSEs, and then my dad wanted me to go to college, so found a college that would accept me. And at the end of the first year, I'd failed. They informed me that I'd failed my A levels and I could continue the second year and go on at GCSE level. And at the end of the second year, I failed everything at GCSE level, which included photography, which broke my heart, my dad's heart, radio, and media studies. But yeah, failed those all. But I was doing hospital radio at the time, which I started doing when I was about 15 or 16, and that was what I was really interested in. So yeah.
It's interesting. I kind of think we both share this kind of frustration with kind of our academic years, and I kind of share a kind of a similar sentiment. Would you say your schooling years were not particularly happy times in your life? And when you kind of look back, do you think kind of maybe the system kind of let you down maybe in some way?
No, I think, no, I couldn't say that. I had amazing friends at school, a few of which I still keep in touch with now. I mean, there were plenty of schools to pick up friends from that I ended up going to. I don't think the system failed me. I don't think anyone failed me. I just don't think, I think some people are built that way, and I don't think academia is my thing really. I go, that's why I'm rubbish at life generally, with things like bills and stuff like that, because I start reading the first line and then it just all just goes into just I recognize the words, I know what they mean, but in that context they're not interesting to me, so I zone out. And I think that's the problem with the academic side to me, but I don't think anyone let me down. No.
I want to move away from the academia side, and you briefly mentioned about falling into hospital radio, but I want to track it back to when you first fell in love with radio and what ultimately made you want to pursue a career as a radio presenter.
So I think my parents weren't massive radio listeners, but, you know, as a kid at the age of 11 or 12, you know, I could go and listen to the chart show on a Sunday, and invariably, I think it was Radio 1. And then, one day I would probably, like I say, I would have been 12 or 13, I think. And then one day I just started tuning around the dial after the chart show and landed on Capital FM London. And it just blew my mind. And the disservice that I'm doing here is that I can't actually remember the name. I can't remember which DJ it would have been on at the time, but had a great voice, was talking about London over these jingles that were just like, what? And then into just amazing songs. And that was it. I just literally from that point, not only became obsessed with Capital, but became obsessed with having to be in radio one day. Just that was it. And that was the only drive and focus that I had from there on. So yeah, I think in my formative years, whereas other kids may lock themselves in their bedroom for various other reasons, I was trying to do radio shows to myself. And then, managed to get onto hospital radio at the hospital where I was born, UCH in London. And then, I did hospital radio until I ended up doing professional radio or commercial radio or radio for a living, essentially.
It's lovely to hear that kind of passion in your voice and the emotion as well, that when you first listened to a particular station and you heard the content, the music being played, it was kind of an initial love and something you really wanted to do. How do you go from the hospital radio, presenting the shows, kind of homing your skills and your confidence and gaining that experience? How do you go from that to the side of getting the breakthrough and professionally earning a living as a DJ or a radio broadcaster? How did that kind of transition happen? So
when I was at college, part of my media course was radio. And God rest her soul, she passed away many years ago. Her name was Linda Gage, and she used to work at LBC, but she also taught the radio part of my course. And the Radio Academy got in touch with my college and basically said, look, we are putting on this festival in Birmingham. Do you have anyone in your radio classes who you think would help run the student-led festival radio station for 3 days? And Linda was like a real supporter of mine, and I'd taken my hospital radio tapes, and so she got in touch with the Radio Academy and says, well, he has to be on this course or on this radio station. So I went to Birmingham for 3 days, did that, and then you would host, the show didn't go out on any frequency. It was sort of around the conference centre at break times when all the delegates would come, and you would do your show, and that would go out at morning break, lunchtime and afternoon break. And over the 3 days, as one of the chosen presenters, you'd have to do one of each, so you'd have to do. And I think it was the lunchtime show that I was doing on the second day that I interviewed Paul Robinson, who was at Radio 1 at the time. And he was so lovely. And then after, I was nervous. And then after the interview and playing the song, he gave me a business card, and he said, well, when you're back in London, he said, give me a call and I'll take you around Radio 1. I'll show you around Radio 1. So I did, and then and he introduced me to various people. And then after college finished, I did a brief stint as a decorator's labourer, which was fine. It meant I got to listen to Capital all day, and then which I loved. And then one day I decided, then I did telesales, and then I remember the name of a woman that I'd met when I went round Radio 1 to what we got to lose. So I gave her a call, Mandy Salboni, and she sorted me out with some promo work. So I'd do telesales through the week, and then at weekends I'd go and be one of Radio 1's promo people, driving I think they said it was over 100 grams worth of off-air vehicle. It was called the Roadster. It was a transformed transit van, or converted transit, with a hydraulic stage at the back, fully functioning broadcast studio, and they would do off-air events. And so I'd have to drive that to different parts of the country every weekend, set it up, wait for the DJ to arrive, wire the whole thing up for them, give out stickers, be branded and all that. And then, yeah, it transpired afterwards, after I finished doing the promo work for Radio 1, that I wasn't old enough to be on the insurance for that anyway. So I was driving Manchester from London down to Devon. I was driving all over the place every weekend, completely uninsured. Don't know if
Could have been arrested.
Huh?
Could have been arrested.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
So luckily, touch wood, that was all right. And then, yeah, just through the people at Radio 1, then I'd get to know some of the jocks, and they would say, well, come in and use our studios if you want to put together demos. And so I did. And then the position of messenger at Radio 1 came up, which I went for. And they said, well, you're kind of overqualified for it, really. But I begged, so I got that. So I had that for 9 months. So it meant I got to work in radio. And then during that time, there were 3 months rolling contracts. And I thought, well, I can't be here for 3 months and then be told to go without having tried something. But I'm not really a pushy person. I don't like to annoy people or get in people's faces. But Eddie Temple Morris was the producer at the time, like the station producer. And he was really kind. I said to him, is there anything I can do? Can I maybe get some voiceover work? So I put together a demo for him. He liked it. And then I was basically the voice of Radio 1 for the summer of '95, doing all their like roadshow promos and a few idents for overnights and stuff. And I'd get so much money for each one of those sessions, plus every CD in the world from all the pluggers to bribe me to make sure that the right producer got the right CD, tickets to every single gig that I wanted, living at home with my mum, earning a decent wage, plus this voiceover stuff. And then the like lovely people, Simon Willis ended up really helping me, because I put together a demo, and he had just started as Simon Mayo's producer, I think, because I think Chris Watmo had been promoted at that point. And he'd come from Plymouth Sound, and he said, well, look, they're looking for someone. So he rang Plymouth Sound and told them to expect my demo tape. So I sent it off to them, and then they gave me some weekend shifts. And then I think within a month or two, they'd given me breakfast. So that was the journey from hospital radio to working in radio.
Interesting journey. Obviously, your initial contact with Radio 1, then going in to meet the presenters and the people in the kind of right positions, and then obviously working and doing voiceover work. I wanted to talk about your role with the first station you worked for, Plymouth Sound, that you've mentioned, but I also kind of want to ask what specifically attracted you to work in commercial radio rather than following, say, a BBC career route. I know you started at Radio 1, or working in kind of talk radio, for example. What was it about kind of commercial music radio that was the kind of big attraction for you?
I think to address the talk radio situation, at the time there was only LBC, which was a completely different monster to the one that's currently out there. And when I say monster, I mean that in a good way, because LBC is now 100% my station of choice. I can't get enough of it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But that was the only real, and I think that was, I don't even know whether that was on 97.3 at the time. I think it was only on 11:52. And they didn't really go for AM. I didn't really listen to AM. And, you know, and the BBC were very, very kind to me. And I got, you know, nothing but love for them. But it's just the fact that when I found Capital was the station that blew me away, that had an effect on my life. And however, and it was amazing working at Radio 1, and the people there were incredible and lovely, and all the presenters were so kind, and the producers would help me with demos and everything. But I think it's because Capital blew me away, and I didn't realize. And then it became this thing. Well, you know, they have to work, and I don't know. Maybe this was an immature way to look at it, a naive way to look at it. But I think because they were playing adverts, I thought, right, well, they have to do well in order to sell adverts, in order to pay wages. Whereas there's sort of funding for that over there. And also when I started going down to Capital, it was a monster. It was, that's what, you know, every kid at my school would talk about what Dr. Fox did last night or what Pat and Nick did last night on the show. And when, you know, I'd go down to the Euston Tower to get my, to get signed photo cards of the DJs and stuff. And there'd just be hundreds of kids just outside, just waiting for either a guest that they had in or the DJs that were there. So it was just this thing that to me was, I can't even describe it. It connected with me, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't, you know, and when I worked at Radio 1, I would still wake up in the morning to Chris Tarrant at breakfast on Capital. So it was, everything was, to me, Capital was my life, really.
I want to pick up on some of these points you're making, because it's interesting. You kind of start your career around about the late 90s, which I think's an interesting scene in Britain. And you've kind of touched upon it a lot, because we've got this kind of whole Britpop thing going on, which is almost like a resurgence of like the British invasion music of the 1960s. And we get all these huge bands like Oasis and Blur and all these kind of rivalries. We've got a kind of cultural scene, this changing as well, with like dance music and so forth. And we've also got a change of government as well. The first time we've seen a Labour government in power for 17, 18 years. Do you think like culturally it was like the right moment to kind of get into the music scene the radio scene from your point of view and music? And I kind of wanted to talk about those kind of early opportunities that came about, such as the breakfast show you did with Sally Bailey, going back on Galaxy 101 in the late 90s.
I don't know how much of the cultural background, I don't know how much that had to do with me being fortunate enough to get where I got to at that stage. You know, musically, it was a brilliant time to be in radio and be able to present that music. I was only talking to a mate over the weekend actually about Alanis Morissette when I was at Radio 1. I think it was Simon May or Mark Goodyear had You Ought to Know as their single of the week or record of the week, whatever it was. And I became obsessed with it, and I wouldn't leave the plugger from Warner alone. And he got me an advance copy of her album and sorted me out tickets to her showcase and stuff like that. And I remember getting to Plymouth Sound in October '95. Go, we've got to play Alanis. And like, no. And Alanis didn't really happen until early '96 when Ironic came out, and everyone went, my God, Alanis Morissette, amazing. And I remember, you know, it's one of those things where you just a little voice in the background going, yes, but I liked her before you did. I know this album off by heart, and you're just learning her first song. So musically, it was a brilliant time. And there was, when I think back to Plymouth Sound, and George Michael had just released Older as well, which is an incredible album. There was some brilliant new acts coming through. Regarding the progression on from there, I only stayed at Plymouth Sound for about 6 months. It was a bit of a whirlwind to be given breakfast that soon. And however lovely they were, I'm a nervous person and a bit of a perfectionist and constant, and I get into my own head too much. And I was aware of the fact that I wasn't really receiving any coaching or any direction, and I didn't know whether what I was doing on the air was any good or not. And Nick Martin was working at Kicks 96 in Coventry and got in touch with me and said, would I go and do mid-mornings up there? And there was no more money, because I think the Plymouth Sound's reach was pretty much Kicks 96's TSA, and Kicks 96 was a small station competing against Mercia. So it was a lesser show, smaller audience, and a much smaller station, but he promised me coaching sessions at least twice a week. So I went up there for a year, and then he was leaving and told me that I should get in touch with Steve Parkinson down at Galaxy 101 in Bristol. By which point, having been in the industry, I'd heard of Galaxy, and Galaxy had become Galaxy 101, because there was only one Galaxy then, had become on par with Capital as the two stations that I 100% wanted to work for. So as soon as I had a name at Galaxy, I got in touch with Steve Parkinson. He said, we've got nothing going at the moment, but come down for a chat if you want. And I went down for a chat. I drove down to Bristol for a chat, drove through Bristol, fell in love with it straight away, went, oh my God, this is incredible. Went to Galaxy, sat down with Steve Parkinson and Simon Dennis. Steve Parkinson was managing director, Simon Dennis was program controller. And they said, oh, we're just waiting for Sally. She co-presents the breakfast show. And I said, okay. They said, yeah, you're going to do a demo with her. And I said, oh, what for? And they said, oh, for the breakfast show. And I literally had no idea. So me and Sally ended up doing this, as soon as we met, we ended up just laughing all the way through. And I remember driving back to Coventry thinking, well, I've ruined that. That's done and out the walk, because I crashed alternato, I crashed the vocal, because we couldn't stop laughing and couldn't breathe. And within a week, they got in touch and offered it. And I said, but that demo was awful. And they went, look, we've never had chemistry like the chemistry that you two had. And you genuinely like each other after just meeting each other. You can't stop laughing with each other. That's the energy we want. So that 5 years, 5 of the best years of my life, Galaxy 101, absolutely amazing.
I want to talk about this chemistry, because you went from being a solo presenter and working as a duo, and you've worked with Sally Bailey on kind of many shows, but obviously started off at Galaxy. What is it like working with her as a co-host? And why do you think your shows became so popular? And I kind of want to talk about, obviously, the breakfast show we just mentioned, and then in the summer of 2002, going on to present the music-based show Core Control.
Yeah. Again, I was in that office. Sally turned up. I was hit for 6 at that point. I nerves setting. I'm so glad that they didn't tell me that before, because I would have been bricking it, overthinking it for days before the drive down, and then I would probably ruin the demo altogether. So I'd had about 5 minutes to get nervous, and Sally walked in this big cardigan with these flip-flops on. She was holding a box of Marlboro Lights. They would Sally, it's Cam and everything. And I said to her, she went, oh, these demos are horrible, aren't they? I went, yeah. In an effort to procrastinate, I said, should we go for a cigarette? So we went downstairs and we were having a smoke. And because of her attire, it was in St. Paul's at this point, before it was on Baldwin Street, and all the cars were parked around the square. There were hundreds of cars. And because of her attire, I went, I bet you I can nail your car, know which car's yours. And I pointed out this crappy little Citroen 2 CV with hand-painted flowers on it. And that's when, and she just started laughing, then I started laughing. It was her car. And we just went in and did that demo. So I think from the first point there, and all my mates didn't understand why I never fancied Sally, because she is still beautiful. But I think I was in a relationship anyway, and I was one of those that sort of don't tunnel vision with the person that you're with. So that was really good. And so she just became, literally, we stayed in touch after that demo, whether I got the gig or not, we were staying in touch. And then I would ring her and she would do stuff on the show that I was doing in Coventry. She'd be voices and stuff if I had to sit in on breakfast there. And that was literally only a week, because it was a week later that they rang to offer it. And yeah, and to this day, she remains, it goes beyond best friends. She's sort of like the older sister that I never had. I've got 2 younger sisters, but all my family see her as family. They all love Sal, and her now family as well. So yeah, I see Sal once a week, I'm being a bit slack recently, maybe once a fortnight, once a month.
What would you say stand out memories from presenting with Sally over the course of many years? And kind of skipping forward a bit, I wanted to touch a bit more on Core Control and
Mhm.
what kind of made you decide to depart from the show back in 2004?
So, yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know how much I can and can't say. I mean, there were old companies. There was Chrysalis and GWR, and I think at that time, GWR we didn't realise, but they were in the process of buying Galaxy, of which I think the Monopolies Commission had a problem with after all. But they had been offering, I think, since about 3 or 4 months into Kam and Sally at Breakfast on Galaxy, GWR had been coming along with offers on the table a couple of times a year for us. But they'd take us out. It was lovely because they'd take us out for posh meals and cocktails and everything. But we never would have left Galaxy for anything. Didn't want to, no. Galaxy was the best. It was incredible. And they offered us this networked evening show, and we went away and we spoke about it. We went, and then we went back, said no thanks. And then it was kind of like, and this isn't obviously verbatim, but it was kind of like, well, guys, we've kind of just bought Galaxy and we want you to do the networked evening show. And it was that kind of thing. So within 2 weeks of us being off Galaxy Breakfast, we were now on this networked evening show from Bristol, which was fantastic. You know, don't get me wrong. Galaxy was just the time of my life. I think Core Control that's probably the hardest we've worked. They were 12-hour days because that went over 38 stations. That, you know, and in an effort to exceed any expectation, we tried to, I said, I think the technology is there that we can make each site sound local. So that was recording 3 local links for each station for 1 hour for the 3-hour show for each of the stations across the network and getting them sent off. So that's, you can do the maths if you want, but that's 3 times 38. We were doing that every day. We had probably, because it was 1.6 million listeners a week. And I think we were people wanted Radio 1, their artists on Radio 1, and then they wanted Core Control before they went anywhere else. So we would do it, so every artist would come in, and even whether they were very much us or not, the radio station wanted to keep the record company happy, and because if we wanted bigger artists, and so we'd do 3 or 4 interviews a day, as well as all those localizations. And then, because I'm a bit of a control freak, I want to edit down the interview that we're playing out that night. I don't want anyone else to do it because I don't think you'll get the essence of what me and Sal put into it. So that was getting in at 11 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and not leaving till 10:30 or 11 o'clock that night. So it was hard, but that the rewards came back in the listeners that we had, the feedback that we got, and it was fantastic. And the artists that we did get to interview, we got to interview people, get to sit down with Pink, get to sit down with Beyonce, get to sit down with Madonna, 50 Cent, George Michael. Every week is someone new. And then, one of those little bands that come through do them just in case, so we can keep the record company happy, was Busted. Me and Sal fell in love with Busted. And I think they got to number 2 or number 3 with What I Go to School For. And the music controller at GWR for the GWR group showed us and all these stations across the UK, and there's a little bar like that where maybe they've got 1 or 2 airplays, and Core Control was just out there. Core Control show, we were airplaying them every night, and if we could, we'd airplay them once an hour, and they became real, just massive advocates of the show. And anytime, and they just blew up. They became huge, and every time we wanted to do something, that they would be, or the record company would be on board with doing it. And whenever we had to go across to any of the live music events, it was just given that Kam and Sally would always introduce Busted and Girls Aloud. Anyone else local jocks can introduce whoever else. Kam and Sally would always, and so, yeah, so Busted and Girls Aloud, they were I think our favourite. But yeah, like I say, I mean, the other people that we got to meet and sit down with and have actual quality time with, and I don't include Madonna under the quality time thing, because that was just an awful 6 minutes of both of our lives in which Sally ended up in tears. True story. But everyone else, and sometimes the bigger the star, the lovelier they actually are. Like Pink, George Michael was just one of the loveliest human beings I've ever met in my entire life, one of the most genuine. And no rush. I think we were meant maybe to have half an hour with them. There was no rush. When the record company people, if we were in the middle of talking, the record company people came in to check on us, you'd sort of be like, no, it's fine, and carry on until we were finished, So we were very blessed in that way. When it came to leaving, the only reason that I left Core Control was because I had the chance to make the 13-year-old's dream come true when Capital London came knocking and said, we want you to do early breakfast. Now, that was 4 till 6 in the morning. That went from a 12-hour day to a 3-hour day, because I get in half an hour before, well, maybe stay half an hour afterwards. It was a music show in the middle of the night. No one really listened to it, but I got to say 95.8 Capital FM and have my name in jingles and idents and be part of the lineup. And that's the only reason I left. And the money wouldn't, but Capital just threw a shitload of money at me as well. But I couldn't, the 13-year-old me couldn't say no to that. The 13-year-old me wouldn't care that I was going from 1.6 million listeners a week to 50,000 listeners a week. So that, that's the reality of it. And I thought I wanted to go back to be around my family. And I love my family, but London wasn't the London that I left. And within 6 months, I was missing Bristol. So I spent the next 10 years of my career trying to get back to Bristol.
I think it's a good point to kind of lead on to my next question, because you were part of the GCAT group with Core Control, and then you mentioned your love of Capital, and then fortunate enough to make the move and work for them. But you've worked for a number of commercial radio stations, and we've mentioned some of those, particularly in the introduction at the beginning. But do you have a favourite you've been involved with? And is there a particular time slot or show that you've most enjoyed presenting?
Do you know what? Well, Galaxy 101 goes without saying, Core Control for different reasons, but what I would say is Galaxy 101, I would say Red Dragon under Colin Patterson. Red Dragon, well, I mean, I got to work with Sally again, and it was just, that was a monster. That lineup under that management with that team behind. I've always said it's like other stations that I've worked at can be a little bit disjointed. Everyone in that Red Dragon office was Team Red Dragon. There was none of this, it was just, and the difference between having a team like that everyone loves the brand as well as each other. When you go on air, you feel like you're walking on a tightrope, but there's a safety net underneath you. When you've got a disjointed office, you're walking on a tightrope, but if you fall, you're dead. I can't explain. And under Colin, everyone just was team everyone else. Everyone was supported, everyone there, and the station, the figures just went mental. No one was expecting it. So Galaxy 101 was anarchic, and that was just the best time of my life. Pretty much do what you want. And it was incredible. Red Dragon, after Capital and before Red Dragon, I went to Hallam, and I worked under Simon Monk for about a year and a half before the Red Dragon offer came in. And I did drive there. And again, Simon Monk created that kind of environment at Hallam as well, where everyone was Team Hallam. The figures at that point were going through the roof as well. Everyone was happy, and I really enjoyed that. I did enjoy that. I loved it. And also it helped that Big John, who does breakfast there, was my best man. I was his best man. We've known each other for 25 years. So that team. So yeah, I think those teams were, and working in those environments would probably have been the highlights. But when, it was hard to leave Hallam, but when the offer came through from Red Dragon, it meant that I got to work with Sally again. So it meant that and it also meant that I'd only be 45 minutes away from Bristol. So that was a no-brainer.
With all your experiences behind the microphone and working in different environments, what skills and qualities do you think are needed to be a successful commercial radio presenter? And which presenters have you most admired yourself and you feel you've learned the most from?
I don't know what it takes really. I think passion and enthusiasm, that's what it takes, I think. And I think the moment that you put up that microphone and you don't get a little jolt of adrenaline, I think then you probably should hang up your headphones and move on. I think it's important, but I mean, is that a radio presenter thing, or is this just a general life thing, to be decent to people, to be polite, be helpful? As far as people who have inspired me, I've been blessed really. My heroes, I could give you the lineup of when that station blew me away. It was Chris Tarrant, Pat Sharp. Well, it was actually before that, because it was John Saxon and Pat and Nick did. But you know, by the time I was really getting into radio, it was Chris Tarrant, Pat Sharp, Mick Brown, David Jensen, Dr. Fox, Martin Collins, Lynn Parsons, and Richard Anderson, and Early Breakfast. They were all my heroes. They were everything to me, and I'm really blessed in that I've met all of them, and not one of them let me down. You know, they say never meet your heroes, never meet your idols. They're all, Lynn Parsons, ridiculous. Clive Warren, Lynn Parsons were really helpful, because they were at Radio 1 by the time I went to Radio 1. They were really helpful with my career. Pat Sharp has been so supportive throughout my career as well. I only got to meet Chris Tarrant once. I missed him by about a year when I went to Capital. So Johnny Vaughan was doing breakfast, who was lush and hilarious. I got to interview Chris Tarrant when he brought a book out. I think I was at Radio Aire at the time. And that, I talk about being starstruck on an interview, but what a lovely, lovely man. So all of those people I met, and none of them let me down. They're all legends, and still, to me, absolute heroes. I think my hero now is, who are my heroes now? I've got, I think, Hawksby and Jacobs on TalkSport, Adrian Durham on TalkSport, I absolutely love. But if the one that I see as my current day Tarrant, who I held up there when I was a kid, James O'Brien, he's just blows me away every day. I think he's fantastic. So it's nice to have those kind of people to listen to, because it still gives me passion to listen to the radio.
We come back to the city of Bristol, where we both live. And you've spoken about your love for the city. You fell in love with it for the first time when you went for a job interview back in the late 90s, and you just love the scene, the people. Can you just tell us about your experiences of working for Bristol's Sam FM, living and working for a Bristol station? And then that kind of leads me on to, how did you kind of feel when you heard the news that Fire Radio and Sam FM were merging to create a new station?
Well, I was really happy when I got the call from, I was doing some work for James Brownlow at Gem. I was doing weekend stuff and doing a lot of cover through the week. And at that point, I wasn't sure. I was living with my mate in Sheffield and traveling to Nottingham to do Gem stuff, which I was enjoying, because it wasn't a full-time job. I didn't have the pressure of, oh, what's radio going to be like? And it was quite nice, and I quite enjoyed that. And I was living with my mate up north, and we were just, men behaving badly just looked like saints, really. They just looked like very clean, healthy, living young men. So I was just having the time of my life. And then, James Brownlow told me that he'd spoken to Rob Davidio, who had just taken over at Sam FM in Bristol, and he'd be interested in talking to me. So I drove down to Bristol to meet with Rob, drove back into Bristol, fell in love with it all over again. And it was just, there was no way that I was ever going to say no to it. So took that. How did I feel about, I always thought Fire Radio was a brilliant brand, and it had a great lineup in Bournemouth, from Max and Jason at breakfast, Drive. So I thought they nailed that brand perfectly. And then they said that they were going to turn Sam FM into hits, which I completely understood, because Sam FM, its playlist at that point probably was too similar to Greatest Hits. So why would you have two stations that pretty much giving you the same kind of service? And Bristol didn't really have a hit music proposition. So that I totally understood. And after 26, they were very kind as well in the way that they handled it, and the way that we left. They were very, very kind. which also meant that I could sit back and evaluate then, after 26 years of doing radio, do I want to do it? And I really needed that time to think about it. And it was nice after 5 years of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, not to have to for a while. And then when, so I completely understood the reason why they needed to put a hits proposition in Bristol. And then when I found out that they were putting Max and Jace on drive time, well, I thought, well, that's just fantastic, because not only are they two of the loveliest humans in the world, but they have got really good chemistry on the air as well. And I genuinely thought, with no due respect to Southampton, but I just thought, what a brilliant city for those two to come to with their families to live and make a new life in. So yeah, so that was good. And I still haven't really answered my own question as to whether I do want to go back on the air or not. So yeah, so I don't know. It's all been quite eye-opening, really, the past few months, and just getting on with other stuff and other. I hate when people say that, they're so vague, and it's just, but other projects with other sort of industries and stuff, just to keep my hand in. But it's quite nice not having you must be here on this day at this time. If I get work through, I can complete it in my own time. As long as it's up by the deadline, I can get it done and it's fine. So yeah. So, but I think, no, I think putting the hits next to greatest hits was the obvious, it was the only thing to do, really.
I think what you've just said leads nicely to kind of my next question, because after your departure from Sam FM, what are you doing now? And do you have any kind of future plans or goals, or is it just a question of living in the moment and see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, after, declaring my undying love for Bristol, which will always be here, because of the work that I am currently doing, it looks 99% like I'm probably going to move back up north within the next month or two, because I have to be up there. Because when I was living with my mate in Sheffield back then, not just a brilliant year or two, he was opening up a nightclub, which has subsequently sprouted bars and various other venues, for which I do a lot of the work for, a lot of the creative, be it audio or writing or content work. But it might need to be more hands-on, and with the office space that I think they're about to get as well, they've kitted it out with full-on studio, so it will be a lot easier for me to actually get the work done that I need to do. Plus be involved with some of the venues on a day-to-day basis as well, which actually, yeah, quite excites me. There is potentially a radio job as well, but with ironing out details of that, whether that will transpire or not, I genuinely don't know.
From all your years in commercial radio and since your departure as well, how much would you say the commercial radio world has changed since your time in it? And I kind of wanted to ask for your take on some stations using more automated content and using more celebrity presenters as opposed to talent like yourself and other people who have honed their own skills. What's your kind of take on that?
It's evolution, isn't it? Everything evolves, everything changes. We can now, we don't need to find an expert or go to the library if we want a question answered. It's right there at our hands, and we like that convenience in it. As far as it changing, I guess to a certain extent, because it was very primitive when myself and Sally did it, but we really did want to exceed expectations. We really did want those local stations to feel like we were part of them, which meant recording those local links and dispatching them completely differently. And then an audio controller would have to load them at their end, so they'd have to be done by a certain time. So I think, I think myself and Sal in a random sort of way contributed to the whole networking thing anyway. But as far as celebrities on the air go, to me that makes sense, because with evolution, radio has become as visual as it has audio on social media feeds, and so it stands to reason that any consumer will probably feel a little bit more comfortable recognizing the person that they're actually listening to. And they don't have to think about, oh, I wonder what that person looks like if they hear them on the air when they say their name. It's Jamie Theaks and Amanda Holden, bang, bang, you're there, you know exactly who you're listening to. So yeah, no, I totally understand it. And like I say, it's become, now every time you scroll through social media, you see something that they did on the show 10 minutes ago. And, you know, like I said earlier about James O'Brien, I'd just go through Twitter, and anytime there's a clip of what, even if I've heard it in the car earlier, I'll have a little look. And so no, to me, that makes total sense. As far as voice tracking and automating content goes, again, I think for the people that are doing it, you can do it because of technology. You can do 3 or 4 automated shows a day for a station in the Bahamas, for a UK-wide one based in London, and maybe you're based in Bristol, and for another one in another city or another country, and earn a really good living. And yeah, each one of those radio stations can save money by not having to pay a full-time presenter to be there for 5 hours or 6 hours a day. So I think it can work for everyone.
Wanted to ask you, outside of radio, what are your interests and hobbies? And coming back to commercial radio, which is obviously reliant on music and current trends, what kind of music do you listen to? And are you musical yourself?
No, I'm not musical. What kind of music do I listen to? Everything, you know. I mean, I'd like to be a lot cooler than I am, but I think certainly recently I was obsessed recently with the latest Coldplay album, to the point that I just overplayed it. So I'm giving myself a few months of it. But no, everything really. Yeah, I mean, to me, one of the televisual and musical highlights of this entire century was the Super Bowl halftime show, because anything that Dr. Dre's ever done, massive fan of. Anything that Mary J's ever done, massive fan of. Kendrick Lamar, massive fan. And so that absolutely blew me away, and I'm so impressed with that. And at the moment, I feel sorry for whoever they get to do the halftime show next year. Anyway, that's a sidetrack, and we went off there. As far as what are my outside interests? Do I have to be a little bit more specific than just saying the word pub? Probably. I still go back to London to watch the once mighty Tottenham Hotspur whenever I can. I was supposed to go to the North London derby recently, but the other team pussied out of that. Oh, sorry. So we're still waiting for that one to be rescheduled. But yeah, no, so I go up north, you know, again, I'm up north on the regular because of work. So that looks like it's probably going to have to become a permanent thing. And then back to London to see family, godchildren, and various other things. So it's quite nice at the moment. I don't know how I ever held down a full-time job. So much to do.
And in this current climate, in the year 2022, it is 2022, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would be your advice to anyone kind of looking to follow in your footsteps and has a passion for radio and wants to become a presenter? What do you feel is the best path to follow and the necessary skills to kind of gain that vital experience?
Do you know, we were talking earlier, or I was probably talking at you, but about evolution. But the one thing I don't think that has changed is that, and I don't think, again, it's limited to just radio. It comes down to, if you've got a dream and you really want to pursue it, a lot of people say it's unrealistic. And and to be fair, there were a lot more stations when I was looking. There were a lot more stations, but that doesn't mean that the stations that are currently out there will no longer need new presenters and new talent. Of course, they always will. I think the main thing is just having a genuine love and passion for it. If you can get yourself in at ground level and work your way up and tell people that you're interested. But I think the main thing is, no matter what level you're at, I just think, and it applies to, I think, anything, just don't be a dick. I think just don't genuine to people. If you know, if you don't believe something about yourself, don't be a bravado. Don't just be genuine.
Be real, yeah.
Yeah, who was it who was saying the other day? There's something about I'm going to get all this wrong now, but no, I can't. But there's something about being. I can't even think the word. No, it's not naive. It's sort of just. Anyway, yeah. Just be real. Be honest, and yeah.
Kam Kelly, your wise words kind of lead on nicely to the penultimate list of 13 questions. We ask every guest these same questions just to wrap up the interview and kind of find out some things maybe we didn't know about you, some things maybe you really like, things that you're passionate about. So you don't need to think about these in any detail. They're just quick questions.
Okay.
Here we go. So number one, what is your favourite pastime?
Pub or football.
Nothing wrong with drinking. I'm a bit of a drinker myself, especially late on an evening. A gin and tonic always goes down nicely.
Budweiser, king of beers, always.
We've spoken so much about broadcasting, radio, music, but we haven't touched upon cinema, film. What would you say is your favourite film and why?
Man on Fire. Because when has Denzel ever not been amazing? Dakota Fanning is just brilliant in that, and it's got everything. I don't think I ever saw it in the cinema, but I think I hired it once when I was looking at, remember Blockbuster, and
fondly.
Yeah, FHM called this the ultimate revenge film of all time, and I was like, I better go, and just talk my way through it, every line, absolutely amazing.
I often reminisce about video cassettes. I remember the big rental stores. It was massive back in the sort of the 80s and 90s. It was like Friday night, you get a curry and rent out a VHS tape, and it would never be wound back to the beginning.
Well, you would have to make sure that you did, and I hope the people who didn't do it before you had it got a fine.
From films, Man on Fire, Denzel Washington, to books, have you got a favourite novelist, and if so, who?
John Grisham, yeah. Every book, love it. It's weird, I'm not a massive reader, to be fair. I usually save it for when I go on holiday. There's nothing I prefer than going on holiday and just getting right into a good book. But yeah, John Grisham.
So many of those Grisham books, novels were made into films, weren't they? And he went for a peak, like with Pelican Brief, The Client, Time to Kill. There were so many of them that became Hollywood adaptations. Yeah,
and I think Time to Kill really is one of those films that did justice to the book without doing too much justice, because the opening pages of that book are just not for it's heartbreaking, really. But the film, certainly. And unless I'm very much mistaken, I mean, you've got the dream team there, haven't you? The Pelican Brief, wasn't Denzel in that?
He was, with Julia Roberts, wasn't
he? That's right, yeah. So you've got Denzel in a John Grisham. Well, I mean, that's just like made, isn't it?
If you never worked in radio, never got behind the desk, never spoke through that microphone, you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
I don't know. I think, but again, this is what we were talking about earlier. My lack of academia dictates that this never would have happened. But based on my love of John Grisham books, something within the law, I think was something that I would probably love to do. But again, like I say, legal contracts, just bored. So, but yeah, when I read those books, I think, and you get that rush when the good lawyer comes through and helps the underdog. You think, oh, come on.
Interesting choice, that. Who in life would you say has been your greatest inspiration?
Well, I've been blessed in that the people that that I'm related to, and the people that I grew up with, and the people that I surround myself with now, they're all fantastic. And as far as career inspirations go, it would just be that lineup that I gave you before. Probably they're the ones that, unless you don't want to try and be any one of them, but you're always trying to reach the standard that they were at. And I think that, you don't ever want to emulate anyone, but you want to go, one day I'd like to be as good, as competent as my job as they are. So I guess to a certain extent, Richard Park, I mean, he, for me, revolutionized local radio and independent radio back in the day and turned it into something that changed my life and took me off in a completely different direction.
Turn to newspapers now. Do you read a daily newspaper? If so, which one do you read?
I don't really. Do you know, I don't. When I'm back in London, seeing me mum, I always pick up the Standard. I always have a look at the Standard. But other than that, no, I don't really read a paper.
What would you say next is your favourite food?
Do you know, I get it ripped out of me all the time about this, but I like salads. I really do. Don't get me wrong. My mate was down this weekend and we had different takeaways on Friday night, Saturday night, and last night. So I'm back on the salads today, but I'm actually really looking forward to making myself a massive salad later. And I usually have those every day, especially through summer.
This next one stumps a lot of our guests. If you had to choose a favourite cultural icon or somebody who's an icon you find inspiring, who would you choose?
Cultural icon.
Could be someone who's a political figure. It could be somebody who's like a figure from history, somebody who's maybe changed or revolutionized the way we live.
Well, it's going to sound really corny, and I bet everyone says it, but I think for the walls that came down and the expectations that were exceeded and the job he actually did in the end, especially when you look at who preceded him, probably Barack Obama. I mean, is that cheesy? Is that just predictable?
I think it's a good choice. Yeah.
Maybe.
He was a great speaker. I always found
And I just think, again, it comes back to that whole thing of don't be a dick. He just comes across as just a genuine, lovely human being.
One of the most interesting things I saw was a YouTube video of him at a rally giving a speech, and he was heckled by somebody in the audience. And instead of ignoring the heckler or maybe saying something rude or inappropriate, he actually engaged in like a conversation with that person, which I thought was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And he kind of made it his moment, which I thought was, in the heat of the moment, I thought was quite an incredible, courageous thing to do, to be honest. And with the cameras, in the spotlight as well.
Yeah, and when it is spontaneous like that, and someone does approach you with something that's completely out of left field that you weren't expecting, you've got to think on your feet, but you can be eloquent and polite at the same time. Yeah, legend.
From Barack Obama now to curse words, what was your favourite curse word and why?
Just probably the worst one because it's so powerful. What's
that one?
I can't say it. Can I?
You can say it, yeah.
It's just so, but it offends a lot of people. It's got to be cunt, hasn't it? I mean, that's just you absolute. But I think when I was on Galaxy, I remember it was in the studio, me, Sally, and Cormac, who was our news guy at the time, who's still at Heart Bristol. I think he's in charge of news across. Anyway, and we were talking about someone, and I genuinely thought the word twat was like twit, and I just went, "Oh, this is the twat, though, isn't he?" And their faces were just like that, and I was like, "What?" And I closed the mic and I panicked. But luckily, with the kind of audience that we had at Galaxy, we didn't get one complaint. We got more people going, "Oh, yeah," ringing up, because pre-text radio station days, and people ringing up going, "Do more of that." Like the time that we did this, we used to do this pre-recorded section in the 6 o'clock hour, where it was called The Evil Kam and Sally. So we'd record it the day before, and basically our producer, who was sort of like the station producer, would come in early on the days that we were doing The Evil Kam and Sally, and he would slow it down so our voices were like that, blah, blah, blah. And it was just a way of getting things off your chest. Do it in the 6 o'clock hour, but he'd bleep out all the bad words. So we would just go mental. So, and I think it was, ironically, now that she's a mother and adores her children, I think the evil Kam had said to Sally, like, what really pisses you off, which was bleeped out. And she went, all children are cunts, like that. Now, the problem is that our producer, I'm not even going to say his name, because he cried at the time, not out of laughter, he was devastated. He'd been out DJing at a club the night before and had come straight into Galaxy in that morning and had about 15 minutes to beep out and he didn't even have time to export it into our playout system. So I had to put his studio up, he was in the other studio, and point at him when it was time to press play. And he'd missed bleeping out one word. So that went out on the air. Sally going, all children are cunts. And that's where it finished. Now, phone lines, even at 6 o'clock in the morning, went absolutely mental. Everybody loved it. Not one complaint.
From the terrible C word now to your favourite place or holiday destination, where would you choose?
Holiday destination, I've been, since last year, since taking my time off, me and mates have just been going on holidays everywhere. So I'm loving that. But I don't know whether, because my mum's Australian, I was born an Australian citizen. Now, Australia is one of my favourite places in the world, and I go back there. So do I call that a holiday destination? Because I'm going back to visit family, and strictly speaking, I am a citizen. But my favourite place in the world is probably Bristol. My favourite holiday destination, randomly, because my family are from there on my dad's side, is anywhere in Italy. I just, so many happy memories from when I was a kid going to Italy. And maybe it's because of my family and my cousins who were awesome. But yeah, I love Italy. The language, the cars, the food, yeah, love it.
The elegance. We're talking so much about music because it is a main part of your job. But who would you say is your favourite music artist, and what is your favourite album?
That's another tricky one, isn't it? Can I say Barack Obama again? No.
Has he released an album? Was he?
Yeah. When I was a kid, it was easy. It was I was obsessed with Shakin' Stevens and 5 Star when I was a kid. That wouldn't have been a problem. Now I don't know. Like I say, I was obsessed with the latest Coldplay album and the one before that. Like I say, anything Dr. Dre has ever done, from NWA up to his solo stuff to the stuff that wasn't that well received. Yeah, but as to my actual favourite artist, I don't actually know. John Grisham, I don't know. Denzel, I don't know.
What about albums? Any albums that you play regularly, or they kind of symbolise a kind of moment in your life, or, you know?
Do you know, there are a few albums that I never get bored of. And obviously, Dre's 2001 is in there. But randomly, Amy McDonald, This Is the Life. There's a song on there called Mr. Rock and Roll. And it's just like, he's dancing on his own again. He's looking on his phone again, basically going on, checking his balance and all this kind of shit, and realizing it's off. And so, but that entire album I can listen to over and over again. I think that's brilliant.
What would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
Probably my career. My career and the people, and I guess more so the people that I've met throughout it, and I continually surround myself with, who are just incredible. Yeah, everything that it's afforded me, really, everything that it's afforded me, that career, I would put up there as achievement.
And the final question, Kam Kelly, how do you wish to be remembered?
Just not a dick. That'd do me.
Some nice final words. Thanks for joining me for the last 60 minutes. I found it a really interesting, engaging interview, conversation. And what I've liked about it is just your sheer passion for what you do and your love of it. It almost feels like your career's almost been like with a family that you've really loved and cherished every sort of moment and the people you've met. And it's just been quite endearing. for me, my two passions in life, I would say, are music and cinema, which play such an instrumental role in kind of my makeup, I guess, my life. Everything I've kind of done is kind of set around those hobbies. But it's just so nice to see someone who's just so passionate. And there seems, throughout the interview, there's been almost a lot of emotion as well. I don't know if I'm...
I found that. It's like a therapy session. Found myself at a couple of points, getting a little lump in my throat, thinking, all right, wind it back. No, there's only man on fire. Stop thinking about it.
I should ask you, what does the future hold? That was a question. And if people want to find out more about your broadcasting career or listen to some of your old shows or whatever, is there a way that it's archived? How can they find out more?
Not really. I don't have, I think I maybe have a couple of CDs from, because you would snoop your show on CDRs. So I think I've got a couple of Capital shows from 2005, but no, I haven't kept anything.
I'll finish by thanking you once again for your time, and whatever the future holds, if it's a new career or going back to the old and getting behind the mic, I wish you all the very best, and thanks for an honest, frank and open interview. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, good. Me too, actually. And thank you, James. Thanks for taking the time.